Hey everyone, if you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's mikeyOPP.com. Thanks!
Hi, I'm Mike Oppenheim, and you are listening to Coffin Talk, Exit Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. Joining me this week from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is Amber VonLiberty, an old friend of mine. We've known each other since 1999, and she is a land and title legal consultant as well as a member of the Pittsburgh Sea Shanty Band and the Cheerleamen. I'm sure she'll explain one or both, and let's hear from her now. Amber, how's it going?
It's great. And it's just so great to be here and to hear your voice after all these years.
I know. I can't believe it. I was trying to explain like how far back we go. And then I was like telling Alana, my wife, that, you came to my house in Iowa, remember?
I remember that. No, it's one of my favorite memories of college. No joke. That was just a magic. Those were halcyon days.
Yeah. So anyway, it was crazy. I was just thinking about like all the times. And also this is what I love about this podcast is I keep getting to get back in touch with people and like find out where they are now and what they're doing. So
yeah, absolutely.
And so actually the first question I always ask guests just so the audience can understand and get like an idea is where did you grow up? How old are you? And what generation do you consider yourself to be a member of?
Oh boy. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, spent my whole life there until about 11 years ago when my husband and I moved to Morgantown, West Virginia, which is somewhere I never thought I'd be. And I am 40 years old. I just turned 40. So obviously on my birthday, the heavens opened and wisdom rained down upon me. And, it's funny. I don't know how to categorize myself generationally. I feel, I'm definitely not a millennial in that sense, but I guess what will we be? Gen X? I guess we're Gen X.
We get like you and I, because we're almost exactly the same age, but I think we get tagged in this weird like micro generation thing. I've had a couple guests say that. Yeah, so that's why we have so much trouble answering that question. But that's enough for me. And I'm sorry that I thought you lived in Pittsburgh again because of the Pittsburgh Sea Shanty Band. So you're still in Morgantown, okay? We
are. We travel up to Pittsburgh. It's only about 80 miles from where we live, and we ended up coming a little bit closer because 3 years ago today, actually, my husband and I bought a farm. We bought the farm over in Fairview, which is about 25 minutes west of Morgantown. So, yeah.
Cool. And I know from your Facebook page, lots of pictures of cute pigs. I've definitely seen that. So,
yes. Yeah. We have two pigs. It's like having two drunk toddlers ransack my house daily. Like that's just all of it. But 6 pugs and two pigs, pugs and pigs. We're all about the animal rescue here.
Very cool. Well, that's awesome. And that's a good catch up. And so the purpose of this podcast is to explore people's faith or lack thereof and their spiritual opinions.
Yes.
And so I want to herd us into that conversation only because time is scant. And I actually know enough of some of your background that I have a feeling you're going to have some pretty damn profound thoughts. So I will not mince words and I'll just kind of be blunt. You've had some pretty close calls with death and you've had some really interesting experiences. Can you share bullet points or just get into one? Yeah, whatever you want.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I guess, I think what you're probably referring to is when I was diagnosed with childhood cancer. I was about 17 years old and I had very advanced Hodgkin's disease. Now, traditionally, Hodgkin's disease under the current science is looked at a little bit different than some of the other cancers. And that's true even back in the 90s when I was diagnosed. So it has a cure rate, which is great, but it's also interconnected with leukemia and other blood cancers. So even though you can address the Hodgkin's with a lot of success, it's the future blood cancers that you have to always be concerned about. And so that happened when I was 17. And then, when I was younger, my mom was actually expecting my little brother and my dad passed away very suddenly. So, there's 2 very traumatic events in the span of a decade for a very young person. definitely left an imprint on my life and has really shaped my views on spirituality and why do things happen to people? Why does any of this stuff happen?
Well, and I do remember both, and I was kind of referring to both. So I think I'm going to start with your father because that happened first and it's like chronological. So you don't need to get into the details of like how he passed, but like, can you tell me about like what it's like to be, I guess you were 7 years old.
I was 11.
Or you were 11. Okay. So did your mom like sit you down?
Yeah. It was funny. So the day he passed was actually the day that my mom and dad were going to get the sonogram to find out that my brother happened to be my brother. And so when I got home from school, I realized something was wrong because it was usually my father that picked me up from school and it was my uncle who picked me up. And I ended up going to stay with a neighbor because he had to go out with my mom. They seemed very panicked, but nobody really wanted to get anything. Something was, we have to go and take care of something with your dad. And that was about as much as I knew. And so nobody realized how severe this was when they were talking to me at that point. And I think when they got to the hospital is when they realized he had actually passed. And so they came home later in the evening because obviously there were a lot of calls that need to be made and arrangements that need to be handled in the minutes after somebody passes. And so when they got home, the way they sat me down was they were very direct, and that's just what I would expect from my family. They were very direct, and it was, it didn't really hit me what was going on until the weeks that followed. That was the weeks it went, the empty chair at the table, which I know sounds so cliche, but it was very easy to sort of imagine that, dad was at work or dad was on vacation. And that was certainly a coping mechanism that I employed at that time. It's kind of what got me through, but his death left a huge imprint on how I view, my relationship with death, I guess is how you could look at it. That relationship has been fraught with a lot of fear and trauma. But when I really got into the concept of past life regression and reincarnation, which I know sounds like a lot of woo, but stay with me on this journey, it answers a lot of the questions that I had about death and why death happens to some people at a very young age, but not others.
Well, actually, it's very coincidental, but we are having a past life regression therapist on the show, and I think her episode is going to debut the week before yours, so this is going to be awesome because she's going to introduce the subject, and you're going to actually talk about how much it did help you. So real quick, what do you think happens when you die?
Sure. So, for me, I really do believe in the concept of reincarnation. And I think it actually dovetails with all of the major theologies and religions and things like that. I think that is an important thing to get out there. For me, I think that we have our souls have this journey that they're on. And I don't necessarily believe that we're in this continual hamster wheel of dying and rebirth and dying and rebirth. I think it's a choice. And when you frame coming, let's say, coming back to this earthly plane, and you're on that journey of perfecting your soul, it really reframes the conversation of things that happen to you and makes it more empowering. And it's more about, this is what my soul needed. This is how I have to nourish my soul so that it can get to that next ethereal plane, whatever that may be. And I also think that reincarnation really speaks to the possibility of paranormal activity. All of a sudden, we can start to answer those questions if we think about the geography of the afterlife, right? A lot of books have been written on the geography of the afterlife and discussed how it's these spiritual planes of existence, and you kind of keep leveling up, if you will. And you might be stuck in a particular plane for a really long time, and that's just your soul's journey. But if you think about those planes like stacked panes of glass, and I love this, it kind of dawned on me the other night when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about. Think about the afterlife and those planes of existence like stacked planes of glass or panes of glass. And, when you look through stacked panes of glass, there's light that catches through there and reflects. And so, of course, we have paranormal activity. there are all of these planes of existence that are beyond the earthly realm that we can't participate in while we're here, but they can seep through just like that light seeps through those stacked panes of glass. Makes sense to me.
Amber, you're like you're as brilliant as I remember you. This is awesome. That was a great explanation. Look, I mean, I've interviewed, I think you're like guest 38 or 39. I mean, we've done a lot of these, and everyone always adds something new to the conversation, and you've added a lot of new things. So thank you. And I'd love to just kind of like play out a couple questions that came to my mind from this. So have you actually had past life regression therapy?
So I'm not ready yet, and I'm going to tell you why. It's a real kick in the gut, and it's something I think you have to be mentally prepared for. It's a very healing experience, and I'm really lucky because I've kind of come to this place in my life where I have made my peace with my mortality. Facing your mortality at 17, when your life hasn't even really begun, is intense. Seeing your parents' mortality disintegrate when you're 11 is intense. And so that left this trauma with me that I had to sort out. And when I found reincarnation and I really learned about it, and I realized how it's not a one or the other kind of proposition. You can't, I can still speak cogently about Christianity or Islam or Judaism and have that dovetail with reincarnation. And when that really hit home, it resolved a lot of trauma for me. So I haven't needed to go back yet, and I haven't wanted to open that can of worms until I need it. Because when you do need it, when you do have that unresolved trauma, I think revisiting the core, the epicenter of what is actually causing whatever fear is going on in your life, how it's reverberated through past lives, perhaps, that's where you need to tap into that.
Awesome. You said this is what my soul needed, and that struck such a strong chord that I'm probably going to name the episode that. And that's how I cope with the major trauma in my life, of which I have like one event, but it was still my event. And like, so I'm curious, how does, I'm gonna like set up a fake / real paradigm, but like, so how do crimes affect you when you're not involved? Like how do you view morality given all this? Like, do you think that a soul needed to murder and then a different soul needed to be murdered?
I hate to say this, but I'm going to give you, because I don't like to speak in absolutes, but I am here. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you why. So here's the thing. If we accept that our souls are on this journey, right? Everyone is on this journey. There are clearly people that are not as, they're not as high up in the plane as maybe somebody else. If you want to think of it, as like a ladder almost, they're not up there yet. And that, if they're at that more rudimentary level, what I would say is that their souls made a choice at some point that they needed to experience the consequences, the anguish, the horror of being the villain in some storyline for whatever reason, to teach their soul, to nourish their soul so that they could make sure that they in the next life and in the next plane are better people. Perhaps they're more empathetic people because of that in a future life. And I would say to the person that was murdered that their soul needed to experience that kind of victimization for whatever reason. And I'm painting with very broad brushstrokes here. Keep in mind, like this is, so, they needed to experience that. There's something critical in that experience, or in how the experience manifests is not as important as the lesson that's in it. And so it may not be that the soul itself, I want to make this clear, I don't necessarily think that everything is predetermined, right? It's not like so-and-so at 2:47 is going to murder person A, like, no. But there's something driving that is a carryover from that choice. And that murder is the manifestation unfortunately and horribly, of whatever that person's soul lacked and the lesson it needed to be able to move forward. And I don't necessarily think everybody moves forward in one life or two lives or three lives. Some souls don't learn. And this is something that when reading a lot of the literature that's out there and reading a lot of the accounts, it comes up again and again. We're not all programmed to be better in every single life that we live, but we have the choice to be better. And that, to me, is everything, because there's always that inherent choice that we can take a step back and say, maybe I would get a little bit more out of this life if I am a better person, or if I'm kinder, if I'm gentler, if I bring more light and love. That choice is always there.
This is fascinating, and I love so many of the points you made. And I want to kind of generalize what you said to make sure I understood it correctly, but also for our audience. So you do believe that there's momentum, but you would not call that predetermination. And so any soul in any life can always not do the quote unquote wrong thing, which again, you're not calling wrong.
Yes, absolutely. We always have a choice. And I think that is the spark of madness. That's the magic spark. That's what makes this life worth living. Because wouldn't it be horrifically boring if everything was just set? I mean, if again, accepting reincarnation as being true, everything is set out and our souls already chose everything we're going to do. No, that would be awful. It's what you do with it. It's the same thing in this life. It's just when you think of reincarnation, it's on a grander, more elongated scale. We choose and choose well.
Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to kind of hit you with a weird point, because I didn't see this coming, but I do kind of want to challenge you, not to give a different answer, but what is blocking you about the regression? Because you sound so healthy and normal. So I'm sorry, I know that's a weird question, but.
Oh no, it's a weird question. No, it's just, I think it's a really powerful tool. And I think it's something that I want to do some more reading. I want to make sure that before I open that can of worms, I'm ready to confront who I may have been in a past life. I think you make a really great point, right? I do feel really healthy and together, but it would be really sad for me to know that I was a jerk in a past life. You know what I mean? But I must have been. Right? I've been a jerk in this life. But that's the thing. It's I think what I think my past lives may have amounted to is I can be at this point now where I have been faced with this trauma, and I can go, okay, well, I'm going to deal with it by, trying to be a better person, as opposed to becoming embittered and lashing out. And I think that's the culmination of past lives. I think that that's an inherent wisdom, because not everybody would not, and again, we're talking about things here. It's well, why do people do anything? This is one possibility, but it certainly makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And so I kind of want to ask a tangential question, because you mentioned earlier paranormal phenomena, which is another subject we've explored briefly, but not a lot. So I'm curious, have you ever prayed to your dad, and do you feel like he talks back to you? Do you think your dad is still around and going to be reincarnated, or what are your thoughts about all that, specifically with your dad though?
Oh, wow. Specifically with my dad. So first, yes, I wouldn't say I pray to him. I would say I talk to him. And now that my mom's passed, I talk to her, and I do get answers. I get a lot of dream visitation. And dream visitation, for me, it's very different than a regular dream. I tend to be pretty empathic. And so I think I happen, because I am open to this sort of stuff, I tend to experience it. There are some people that would look at me and say, oh, well, it's just in your head. But, that's enough. Maybe it is just in my head. But but these dreams and some of the things that I've experienced, just, paranormal activity generally, I really do think there's a little more to that. And so I do think that, so now we could go really far down the rabbit hole. There's this whole concept of, being a split soul, and part of your soul reincarnating, but the energy imprint that's left behind, you can be in both places at once, basically. And that concept to me is pretty wild. And I haven't really gotten my head all the way around that yet, but I do believe both my parents are, I think they're in that place too that we haven't talked about, which is kind of that middle ground, between lives. A lot of folks who have studied this and have, gone through these regressions with clients and things like that, and they talk about this sort of resting plane where you go after you die to sort of reflect on your life and reflect on, well, this is what my soul needed. This is what I set out to do in this life. Did I do it? What did I learn? What could I have done better? What can I take with me to the next life? What should I try to shed? And who knows? But if they're in that plane, or if they've chosen to catch the next train to Earth, I don't know. But I know their energy imprint is with me, and I know that that I hear from them. Not my dad as much as my mom, but I do when I need them. They're there.
I loved your mom, by the way. I just want to throw that out there.
Oh,
very memorable, and just
she was great. She she passed about 3 or 4 years ago now, and me too. I'll tell you though, she went out the way she lived. She fought like hell, and I she's a great example of this. I think about my mom when I think about reincarnation a lot, and she had such a hard life. She had such a hard life. Just her childhood was very traumatic in a lot of ways for her. And her young adult was traumatic, and then she found my dad, and she had 16 years of wedded bliss, but marriage is hard. And then she lost my father, and then she had to raise a son on her own and a daughter on her own, and then she had I had cancer. Why does my wish for her when I let her go, because I was with her when she passed, was take this love to the next life. And I hope the next life is kinder. I hope you learned whatever you have to learn. And I really did. I remember I sat there in her room holding her hand as she was passing. And I pray that her spirit heard all of that. I believe she did. Take all of this love. And that was always my wish for her.
That's beautiful. And I do want to ask, and again, certain guests I wouldn't ask this, but I trust that you're not going to be offended. But did you see like the animus, quote unquote, leave her, like when you actually saw her pass?
No, I didn't see that. There was so much frenzy in the room. There was so much frenzy, and I was not looking for that. But I do believe that is what happened. I really do believe. And whether they say that people that have gone through near-death experiences, that you sort of float above your body. And interestingly, when folks do past life regression, they recount that experience floating above their body, their souls, and speaking to their bodies like, oh, I'm leaving now, And so that's got to be a pretty intense experience. But I think that it absolutely, it completely makes sense to me.
Totally. And when a person dies, do you think the person will ever come back, or is the soul going to come back, but that person is completely gone?
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So, well, what I think, and certainly there are a lot of questions that have a million answers. This is a question that has a million answers. I think we're all splinters of the people of the people we used to be. I really do. I think that we take the love with us. We take the trauma with us. We take the energy of our prior lives with us to the new life. And I think there are these studies on young children, for example, who are, speaking about things and talking about deceased relatives that died years before they were born, and they couldn't possibly know who these people were, or young children that can speak foreign languages fluently. And this is documented, where does that come from? So yeah, we're splinters of those people. Do we carry, do we carry those past life memories actively in our in our current lives? I think there's an argument that certain dreams probably are memories. And I think that that's where past life regression can come in and, put some pieces together. There's a great author that I'd love to plug. His name is Brian Weiss. He talks about this sort of phenomenon, and he was incredulous because here's somebody that has this incredible educational pedigree, and he's in a very esteemed profession of psychology and science. This is a man of science, and I think when you see past life regression the way he's experienced it, and the way that I have had some friends who have experienced it, there's no question that it connects the dots for why we have certain behaviors. Personally, for example, I have OCD that I wasn't diagnosed until much later in life, just probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And I've always been just, oh, well, that's Amber. She's very type A. That's Amber. She's just a real go-getter. No, I have, that's not it. And so, but so that begs the question, well, why? Like, why am I wired this way? Why is this my brain chemistry? Well, beyond, whatever they can look at through, brain imaging, why does my body respond this way? Why do I respond this way? And I am certain that there are some things in past lives that have contributed to that. So have I carried that forward? Is that a splinter of a prior personality? Absolutely.
Wow, that's so powerful. And we are running out of time, but I always want to give my guests a last chance to just say whatever they want to say. You have the floor. So this is your chance to speak to an audience of people who may or may not share your opinions and faith.
Well, I just want to clarify my statements here. I'm not any kind of expert. I'm certainly, I'm well read, of course, and this is absolutely something that fascinates me. But, these are my opinions, these are my beliefs, and this is the thing that has really helped me to settle my fear. I had such a fear of death, Mike, and you probably remember this from when we were kids. It cantilevered over my entire existence. And, I needed to get out from under that. I needed to figure it out. And this is what gave me the path forward. And it was a way for me to kind of compartmentalize and say, okay, I got to make the best of this life. I'm going to ride this till the wheels fall off and squeeze every ounce of joy and love and friendship and music and all of it out of this life. But it took that burden off of me in some respects that I don't have any more chances, no, God, if something catastrophic were to happen and I had a traumatic, terrible cancer diagnosis tomorrow, I'd be really sad, right? I would be, and I would fight, but I would be able to pass with dignity and with on my own terms, knowing that I was going to take all of that love with me and use the time I had to give as much love and leave that imprint of beauty and love behind, so that the people who were important to me could take that with them. And so that is where this comes from. And the reincarnation in this philosophy is what gave me the ability to stop living in fear and to start living in love. And and so this is just my belief system, and I don't intend to impose it on anybody else. And certainly I have tremendous respect for folks that would hear this and say, oh, well, I completely disagree with that because this flies in the face of my Catholic faith or my Christian faith or whatever faith that particular person subscribes to. And I would say I completely respect that. And I think that's important to get out there. I don't want anyone to think that I'm witnessing to them or trying to convince them. But I encourage anybody to pick up some Brian Weiss books and read them, because I do think that they're really powerful, and it's a unique perspective, if nothing else.
Well, that is awesome. And Amber VonLiberty, thank you again for coming on the show and helping us put another nail in the coffin. It has been incredible to catch up with you and talk to you and hear your wisdom, which is true wisdom. And whether or not people agree or disagree, I loved it, and thank you again. So everyone, this has been another episode of Coffin Talk, Exit Interviews with the Living. My name is Mike Oppenheim, and as always, we will see you soon. Walking alone when I walk into you, and I see that you see me, and I see you hear this tune.